Hi, this is Dr. Cesar Oliva with another episode of the Way to College podcast. And the great thing about the podcast is the opportunity to connect with folks in my network and connect with folks that I met, you know, early, I think, in my own educational journey. And before I allow my guest to introduce himself, I don't know if he remembers this, but I think the first time I met my guest, I was a high school student, and I want to say maybe a junior in English or a history class. And my teacher at the time, now Dr. Frank Guajardo, invited him to come to our class. And he was a local university student. And he came to talk to us about an organization that he was a part of. It was called MECHA, and Movimiento Estudiantil Chicano de Aztlán. And so I remember being really enthralled and interested and engaged. And I think later that year, a few of us went to the MECHA conference that was being held at the nearby university. And so that was the first time I met this guest, and I've known him since. But Raul, why don't you introduce yourself to our audience out there?
Well, hello everybody. I man, wow, that was that. Yeah, Mecha. That was. I mean, I was breathing fire out there. Yeah, man. I was like, boom. And so I'm Raul Valdez. Uh, I'm a high school principal here at Raymondville Early College High School. I'm from Monte Alto, Texas. So it's about 2 miles, no, 4 miles from Edcal Chelsea. So I lived in the Delta area throughout my life, and I'm proud to be here, Dr.
Awesome.
Saliva.
Awesome. Thank you, Raul, for joining us. And I hope we get into those days of you breathing fire with Mecha.
Yeah.
Uh, but I ask all of my guests, if you had to identify a starting point for your own educational journey, where would that starting point be for you?
Hmm. Geez, I had really, really good elementary teachers in Monte Alto Elementary, and they took the time to talk to you, and then they were very, very strict, very, but they had expectations, and you formed a bond. It was a very small community, and so you knew who was who. And I remember I was in a speech class, so it was part of like special ed program where I had some trouble with my vowels, and I may still have some trouble with my vowels, but I remember it was speech, and just they just Miss Wilson. I remember it was a speech class, and she would pull me out of regular class, and we worked with some kids, and it was great. It was just she showed she cared, and I think that was not that was commonplace. A lot of our and I still remember those teachers. Miss Martinez, Miss Loyola, and Mr. De La Rosa, Miss Cuellar, Mr. Barba, Miss Gutierrez. Mr. Alejandro. All of them were very instrumental. In just kind of creating that desire to learn, that there's a lot to learn, and it's okay to ask questions. Even though my demeanor when I was growing up was very, a lot of it came from tienes que tener respeto, you don't question people, you don't challenge authority. And so that was part of my upbringing. But I had that hunger to learn, I feel.
The For our listeners out there, Raul, and I've had other folks from Monte Alto. Um, Describe Monte Alto for us. Describe the community for us.
Well, Monte Alto is man, it's a town. It's a town. It's not a city. It's an unincorporated community. And so it's got a Baptist church and a Catholic church. It's got a drive through, El Quick Quick. It's got we still call it the economy. It was the economy back in the 80s and 90s maybe, but it's something else. And we have no Cavazos grocery. It's no longer there, but we have a panaderia, and so a bakery, and we have our elementary school, middle, junior high, and a high school. And so it's a very agricultural community. Most of the people when I was growing up worked in real farms. And so back then, and this is something I mentioned a lot of our students there at the high school. Back then, you were able to graduate from high school, 18-year old, and be able to go to real farms and work there and actually rent a home, rent to own, and you could raise a family, and if your wife worked at at a local area, at the Hager or Fruit of the Loom, like a lot of my tias did.
Yeah.
They travel actually over here to Raymondville, and made some friends here in the Raymondville community. But that was life, it was agricultural, and people's like, hey, graduate, and then you can work and English, and you can maybe be a foreman, or you can, and my dad worked there for many years, but of course the freeze, that kind of changed things a lot in '83, and then another one a few years later. But that was something back then. And so we grew up that way in a lot of very agricultural based jobs, and we would go to Ed Chelsea because there was no high school at
Mhm.
at Monte Alto, and so we developed a lot of good friendships along the way at Chelsea High School. And that's where a lot of my friends graduated from. It was
Mhm.
until maybe about 10 years ago where there was a high school built in Monte Alto, but it was a farming community, very close knit. Um, One of those communities that you say, mira, oh, who's that? You met somebody, or you see somebody, it's like, oh, I don't know. They're part of the new people, they moved in. Well, shoot, those new people moved in 20 years ago. And to the community, you still think it's the new people. No, man. They've been there 20 years ago. And over by the Lantana and Colonia, the neighborhood, is they've been here for a while, but there's people that are very deep roots in the
Yeah.
community. But that's where I'm from. That's where I grew up. And even to this day, we'll go to a quinceañera, or we'll go. People, friends, will invite us for barbecue, and these are friends that that are professionals now that I met at Monte Alto or Hidalgo County Head Start in Monte
Wow.
Alto. Yes, we were
Wow.
fighting for the bikes. There were iron bikes, steel bikes, and those were heavy, but we would fight for them because there were. I mean, and even till then, I mean, to now, like we still, even now, we just think back of think back to the days where we play at the elementary playground.
So, Raul, you describe this wonderful community where you've established, right? That you talk about the deep roots in this community. It sounds like you yourself established some very deep roots there. And you talk about how it was a place where at 18, leaving the high school, you could work at the real farms and you could get a job, you could get a good job, but you know, elementary age, middle school age, what were your aspirations? What is it that you wanted to do?
When I was in junior high, our friends would talk about, hey, what do you want to do? And I wanted to be an architect. I wanted to design stuff, kind of solve some problems with whether it buildings and things like that. And so I wanted to be an engineer, right? And so one of the best things that happened to us in our group was that we really enjoyed playing sports
Mm.
and athletics, and so that kind of kept us grounded. That kind of kept us focused. I believe focused on making sure we passed, making sure you know, um, we studied and so when I went to graduated from high school, I became I was a pre-engineering major at UTPA, right? And so, man, and I mean, I, the second year or maybe in my spring of the freshman year, I realized, man, I was like, man, I'm taking differential calculus and things like that, and long story short, I think math got in the way. My, I'm not sure how my bridges were going to be, they were going to stand or not, and I'm glad. I think that's the best decision I made was just to kind of like, change my major because I felt teaching, I felt talking to people, communicating. Not that you don't do that as an engineer, but that was, I think, I had some of those skills that I think would I would be better off working with kids and students and other teachers and things like that. And so um, I just gravitated to being a history major and going into education.
Why, the way you described the community, and of course, I don't know that you gave us enough context for this to give us a sense of a lot of kids went to college. A lot of kids from Monte Alto went to college. But
Mm.
it sounds like you said, in junior high, you were already thinking about being an architect and then graduating from high school, going and being a pre-engineering major. Um, was college always part of the plan for you, or was that put into your head by somebody, or was it, in your family, or tell us about that?
My dad would always value education. He'd say, "Hey, don't be like me. Don't be out here working out in the fields." And I agree with him after like several years of going up north and working in the fields. I was like, you know what, you're right, Dad. I want to go. I want to go back to the fields. And so that kind of got us going. I mean, it was hard. It was hard working in, going up there in Michigan and just being disconnected with what you knew, well, disconnected to your world, the valley, your girlfriend, the music, the food. Um, Now I guess there's some communities up north where you can go and get your food or your fajitas and your pan dulce and things like that. But back then, you months and months and months would go without eating Mexican food, and just the ones that your mom made. Um, but going back to that is just we did have teachers that encouraged that, and we would see teachers and my parents would, I say, mira, so and so, look at him, he's got a good job, he's working inside, and to them,
Wow.
my parents didn't know like necessarily about bachelor's degree or a master's degree or a doctorate. They knew, hey, ese le fue bien, ese estudió, ahora trabaja adentro, like trabaja donde está el aire acondicionado. You know,
Wow.
I
Yeah.
mean, in Monte Alto, like growing up, we didn't have AC, we didn't have air conditioning. If you had central air, like wow, like
Yeah.
somebody said like if you had two ACs, then like you were like a Republican or something. Like central air, like you're. It's like wow, no, yeah, you made it. But my dad would always make sure that I knew that, like, look at Mr. Escobar, he's an old republic, and he's got his office inside the house, and like wow. I was like, and so he always like made sure I knew, like, hey, you want to be like this, you want to make sure you have a good job and raise your family, and we pointed out to some people that went to school and or graduated. We had an older cousin that graduated, got a degree in social work or what have you, and he's like, hey, look at, I mean, see where he's at. He went to Dallas and was working out there, and so they always pointed out. But we had outstanding teachers, and then moving into at Chalsa, I had Dr. Frank Guajardo, who I came into his classroom about maybe two weeks late once school started, and I go in and I just say, well, I just came in. I'm a migrant farm worker, and he just said, you know what? Tell us about your experience. Tell us about what is it that it entails, what you do up there. And so he goes, hey, tell us. We want to hear what you have to say about, And so we developed a good relationship, and before the end of the school year, he invited me to go to UT with him to take a tour, and I may have been one of the very first ones that he actually encouraged to go and visit campuses. And I had no idea what I was going into. Like, what UT? Like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
Wow, and um, that kind of opened a conversation that we never had. No, because we didn't sit around with my parents and they didn't ask us about, hey, what do you think about a college tour this spring? No, they were not going to talk about that because, they hadn't been exposed to that, and
Yeah.
neither was I. And so um teachers were very, very important, very big and important influence um through, and throughout the my junior high and high school years, always, and you knew those that had those expectations and opened up kind of like a glimpse of a new world. Like, hey, wait a minute, have you heard about this? Have you read this?
Mhm.
And in college, this is what you're gonna. And it was kind of like in college, when you go to college, this is what you're gonna be exposed to.
Wow. You go to UTPA, you're doing pre-engineering, and as you say, math got in the way. So you decide to change your major to history and to go into education. Um, was why why teaching? What is it that maybe appealed to you about teaching as a profession?
Well, I mean, I had a lot of great teachers, but I think part of it, and you mentioned Mecha, right? And at UTPA, I made some friends, and they were in Mecha, and they were like, just talking about culture,
Mhm.
about being proud of who you are, and being a person that has confidence and is not shy, is not, and I think part of me wanted to be able to be more confident, maybe, and I would gravitate it to that, and not be embarrassed about, going to Mexico or listening to music, listening to Mexican music, and how the world has changed, right? Now it's like
Yeah.
you have artists out here at the Tonight Show or whatever, the late night shows and stuff like that, and singing in Spanish and things like that. But back then it was, I was a first generation American, you know,
Mhm.
it was one of those, like made in Mexico, born in the United States. We'd go every weekend, go to Mexico because my dad used to farm out there still.
Oh,
He
wow.
Yeah, so he'd work in real farms here, and he'd go out there on the weekends, and he'd want us to go out and to the rancho, um, and that experience was kind of like, hey, wait a minute, I'm rooted, still, but I also want to be able to be successful here, and I think part that first couple of years in college kind of gave me that confidence, in learning about myself and learning about my culture, and believing that, hey, it's okay to be who you are,
Mhm.
and don't be shy, and then coupled with my experience as a migrant farm worker, where I faced a lot of, pushback of just being in their community. You know what I mean? We had
Yeah.
a, we had a lot of great neighbors and a lot of people that really, really were really nice, but there was still some man, some just I don't know what you want to call it, but kind of like nativism or whatever, where it's like, hey, this is our town, and you don't come in here, and it's like, oh man, we're just here to work.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so several of those experiences, kind of like shaped, I guess, or kind of drove me, to continuing, because there was some times that were very tough, because um just trying to get to class, be able to go to class, be able to 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 pass my classes, not because it was difficult, but because I had a lot of different things going on, and I had to make a decision. I had to make a decision. I was driving back home after I failed the test, uh, and I was about to tell my dad and my parents, like, you know what, maybe this is not for me. This is my last semester.
Mhm.
I'm gonna call it quits. This is like maybe my sophomore year. I wasn't making any, you know, I thought I wasn't moving forward, and I was like, you know what, I'm just wasting time, and maybe I can go up north and work with my cousins up in Grand Haven and the blueberry plants, and the factories. And so, um, but as I headed over to open the door, I saw my dad's rubber boots. Man, they were muddy. right there in front of the door.
Yeah.
And I was like, he had worked like 24 hours straight, and he was on his break that evening. It must have been like four, no, maybe like 5 in the afternoon, and he was gonna continue. He's gonna get a little rest. He was gonna have dinner, and it's like, man, this guy is out here working, and I'm here just now, not doing enough,
Yeah.
not doing
Yeah.
enough, really. And that kind of like slapped me
Yeah.
right. That just like hit me right in the face, like, hey man. And to this day, my dad passed away about 10 years ago. But I have let's see, I have this picture of my dad. and I have it on my phone here, and that's his. You better get the stuff going, man. You better get get going. And so I see it every day, and it's like, you're right, man. And let's
Yeah.
go. You know, whatever it takes.
Yeah. Wow. Now, let me ask you, because I think, both of us being in education, and you have kids in college now, right? And so, whether it's maybe advice you've given your own children or advice you've given your students, but um, what advice do you give kids who find themselves struggling and are on that verge of maybe this isn't for me? Maybe school, I'm not cut out for school, right? What advice would you give a young person who is maybe struggling with those questions now?
That's a great question. And I I I think a lot of my friends that were with me that had the brains, they had they 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 just succumb to the sometimes the bureaucracy or the no, this is not the office. You need to fill the paper out in the next office and come back tomorrow because this is not how you're gonna get your financial aid. And some of them they were like, man, I'm not gonna do this. My dad has a trucking company and I'm gonna go out there, or my cousin has this or whatever. And they gave up. They
Yeah.
gave and so it can be overwhelming, especially at the beginning, right? But as you're going, and this is something that I kind of talk to not just students, but I talk to our teachers at the campus and colleagues. Just it can be overwhelming, but let's think of two things that you're going to focus on and do better.
Hmm.
Okay, you have your expectations. You have that expectations, but don't worry about the 6 or 8 things or 10 things that you got to do, because it can focus on 1 or 2 things and
Hmm.
and 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 do the best you can with those. Just get better and check yourself every week or every day. Am I doing this? Just pick 2 things that are gonna. And some people say 4, but let's do 2. And this is something that I learned when I was working in Elsa. I was working at the Phillips 66 full service station in Elsa when Mr. Maldonado owned that Phillips 66 right there, which is now in front of Alameda. It used to be the Bonita Inn.
Yeah.
And, and Mr. Maldonado, Noé Maldonado used to have us full service. That means you check the oil, you check the tires, you check the water. Somebody needs a tire replaced, you replace the tire. You did everything, right? And so sometimes he'd see me and I had like a wrench on one hand and I had the crowbar in my other hand, and I was trying to open a door. He goes, hey, it's time out. Do one thing at a time. Don't try to hold all these different things and trying to go through the door.
Yeah.
He says, "Oh, mira tus manos." He says, you have too much in your hands. I said, put one thing down,
Hmm.
the other one down. Okay, now let's move, like open the door and let's go. And then you can grab the other stuff and bring it in,
Yeah.
you know? And so that concept of doing things one at a time.
Yeah.
And you know, in the fields, it was like, hey, pues, you take your surco, take one surco. Don't worry about the other 25 acres that we got to do. You know,
Yeah.
just work on your row or your rows, and then somebody's might help you out, might help you once those people that are done. You know, and so it's always, and even with me, it's like, okay, let me take one thing at a time. You know, whether it be today or tomorrow, it's one thing that I got to do, but let me do it really well.
Hmm.
And with teachers as well, okay, let's pick 5 great things that can happen in the classroom that can keep kids engaged, and you chunk your lesson and you make sure you walk around, make sure 5 things that you can pinpoint. Okay, let's work on 2 of these. Let's work on 2 and take care of that, and get really good at that, and then let's work on the other 2. And so with students, it would be the same thing. It'd be like, okay, how many things do you have going on, right? I just spoke to a student. I had dinner, and I spoke to a student, and he was just graduated in June, just last month, and he's working at a wing place, and he goes, yeah, sir, I'm gonna drive to Edinburgh, to UTRGV, and then I'm gonna work over here and this and that. Okay, hey, okay, do your best. How many hours are you working here? Do your best, take care of that, but then you also need to take care, you have to have a good balance. Make sure you take care of those things there. So focus on, and again, focus on a couple of things you're going to do really,
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
well. It can be very overwhelming.
Hmm.
And then as a young kid, and then you have a boyfriend or a girlfriend. That'll take a lot of your time. I joke around with the kids, like, like, no, I mean, like, just, take things at a time, make sure, but you keep your goal.
Yeah.
You have those expectations, but make sure you don't have too many things in your hands.
I love that. I think that's really appropriate given that, yeah, I see students today, and I saw it with my niece the other day. Um, she had her phone and she had a tablet. She's trying to do right. And even, I was doing some workshops, and I saw students with a desktop or a laptop, and then they had their phone set up, and they had this elaborate setup, and I asked them, I said, can you focus? You can't focus on all 3 things. Like, let's pick one.
Mhm.
And so I think that's great advice, and especially appropriate given that, kids, their attention's all over the place trying to manage so many things.
And so many sources of information,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
So many sources of information that, it seems like you're talking to one of our, you talk to students, and it's like they're already swiping you. I'm like, no, I mean, I'm not a screen. I'm talking to you. Go to your next class. We're talking
Yeah.
about your next class. No, like it seems like it's a lot of information, and then it's like, okay, tell me what's important, boom, 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 and let's go to the next one. No,
Yeah.
let's let's engage first.
Yeah.
Focus on that. But even as adults, we're on phones, we're in laptops, and we're all guilty of it. Somebody comes to my office, and I need to stop
Yeah.
and, and move my laptop down or move my screen to the side because I need to speak to the person. It's very tempting to continue finishing an email or continue finishing whatever report I have, and
Yeah.
it's we're kind of putting that aside and just face to face. And
Yeah. Raul, let me ask you, when you were, you're in college, you have this moment of, let's call it a moment of clarity when you're walking up and you see your father's boots there, and, realize, right, you got to go through, you got to keep pushing forward, right? What were some of the other challenges that you experienced when you were in college? Because having known a little bit of your story, I know it wasn't an easy road. What were some of the other challenges that you experienced while you were going through and earning your degree?
it I think it was, I always say it was me, right? But there was a lot of, I don't know what you call it, like external contingencies, right? That um it it was traveling to and everyone has a story, different stories like this, where like my car didn't go in reverse. My car, I had to park at by the student services in a way where it was close to like a curb or something that I can take off. And then I had to pick up the hood so I can connect my fan so that it could cool the radiator, because if it not, it overheat, you know. And then eventually the car caught on fire at Gavas's grocery there in Monte Alto. It caught literally on fire. Um,
Oh wait, I have to let me stop you really quick because I've done I've done about 115 interviews, Raul. And believe it or not, you are the second person whose car is caught on fire while
yeah,
they're in college.
and I love that. It was a Cutlass Sierra. It was an awesome car, but it just started to like, one thing after another. And I mean, that was just one thing, right? But I think again, just having that focus, and I think, um, and I feel for some students that have ADHD,
Yeah.
because just kind of being able to try to focus, um and just read and read and read, and without, part of me, and it wasn't that I lacked some of these skills. It was just being able to focus and sitting down and going through things. And even to this day, I have to get up out of my office and walk around. I can't sit down. Anybody can tell you. I mean, I'll be in my office for a little bit, work on some stuff, and get up and move around. And I mean, I always say it was me. I needed to focus. I need to work, but there were some things, just situations, and I have five sisters. Uh, my dad would take off to go work in Arkansas, and he kept on working in different states and stuff, and just um, being the only male in the family, the oldest, you had to, something happened with my sister. I had to go out there and help out, or find out what my mom needed and things like that. And so those are things that comes with the territory when you stay at home. When you stay in the valley, when you stay, you feel part of, like, you are the adult, you are the college kid, you are the one that needs to take care of things. And so it kind of pulled me away many times. But
Well, I appreciate that. And I think I know I share the podcast with students all the time, and I think you bring up a really good point about when you stay home, right? You're still a member of the family, and sometimes there are greater expectations placed on you, especially as the oldest or as the one in college. Possibly you're one of the breadwinners, and so yeah. So I appreciate you talking about that, because I think it's easy to put to, like you said, it's on me, but then there are those are factors that are outside of your control, because you have to do those things. There are those expectations that just as a member of a family you do. So thank you. Um, you become a teacher, and now you're a principal. Was the plan always to move up and to become a principal and get into administration, or what happened that has kind of led you to the path that you've been on?
well, slowly, as I was, my second, third year, fourth year in teaching, I had some really, really good principals. I admired the assistant principals. I admired, just it's a tough job, and I'm like, man, how do they do it? Like,
Mhm.
wow, like, just uh, but I admired that, and I looked up to them, and then they slowly kind of got me into, like, hey, can you be a department head, and can you be the team leader for this? And slowly I started kind of wanting to, to be part of a team of the leadership on campus. And then somebody mentioned, and my wife was also very instrumental in kind of encouraging me and saying, hey, you should get your master's, and so I got my master's, and I went through like the full, like, I fall, spring, the summers, and then I graduated. um and so it was a full load for that year. And I was ready. It's like, hey, I'm graduating, and I want to take a deb at an assistant principal position. And so I was fortunate to get offered a position as an assistant principal at a middle school here in Raymondville, and to me it seemed like far away, like Raymondville, like wow. I mean, it's 20 minutes away, but to us, it'd be like it Cachaza and Westland Co. as it goes by, and it's like, but I've been here for 15 years.
Wow.
So I was an
Wow.
assistant principal, and then I became a principal at the elementary, and then at the middle school, and so now I'm here at the high school. So I've been a principal, a campus principal at all the different levels, and I enjoyed every bit of it, man. Um,
Let me ask you real quick. I'm sorry. You're you've shared, you know, I think the richness of your life growing up in the community and the lessons that you've learned from your father. And how have you, or have you allowed those experiences to inform what you do as a teacher and now as an administrator?
I share a lot of my experiences and my stories. I mean, anybody that has worked with me knows about me, knows about some of my stories and some of my experiences, because I like to share and kind of formulate it into a way in which can make sense in the work, and I love to share. I love to share stories, and I experience it, and then listen to others, and it's great. It's great to see others share as well. One quick story. I was talking about, and I it, I always like to share personal stories because it's personal, right? But it's instead of like, hey, did you hear about Tom Brady, how he practices? Like, okay, so I did that once, and then the teacher just like totally like flipped it on me because I was like, hey, Tom Brady, let's check it out. Let's look at this video. Look at he practices in his off season. He's got all these rings, and he doesn't, he still practices. And so, what about his teachers? Like, do you want your Super Bowl and stuff like that, right? Man, Miss Reina here at the high school, she's taught for like 50 years. And she goes, Mr. Valdez, you know where my Super Bowl ring is at? And I was like, what? You know where my Super Bowl ring is at? He's sitting right here on this other table because he used to be one of my students, and now he's teaching our kids, like just like me. Like, man, like, wow. Like to me, that's like something like, man, she continued talking about,
Yeah.
like her win, her Super Bowl is being able to have her former students work alongside with her,
Yeah.
influencing our students, the others, you know what I mean? The other kids coming up, like, wow. Like to me, that beats anything that Tom Brady does, man.
I love that.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
love that. I love
But
that.
but stories are important, and of course, I was very influenced, and my dad was a storyteller, and a lot of my teachers were storytellers, and it just you know um, I just love that. I just love sharing and having others share as well.
Yeah. Well, and I think, I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's particularly like Mexican culture, the Latino culture, or if it's the Delta area. But I feel like a lot of the educators that I know from the Delta area, even the ones that are at the university, they use a lot of storytelling.
Mm,
And I'm always shocked, I think, or just surprised when I meet other educators that are reluctant to share their
mm,
stories.
mm,
And I meet, you'd be surprised, it's more often than not, who they've never shared their story. Maybe they've been in education for years and have never ever shared their story. And I'm always struck by that. And I know for me, and at the university, I tell my students I am an open book, and I share stories, and I try to relate. And I remember when I was, this is what I was experiencing, right? And so, because I think it's important, I think it helps to build that connection. I might be 20 years plus removed from the university, but still, we've all experienced failure, right? We've all maybe had that moment that you had, and like, how do I tell my parents that and so for them, I feel like it helps to build that relationship and for them to relate. So I'm glad that to see that you do that with your students and with your faculty and teachers and whatnot. So that's awesome. Raul, you're a principal, but I know you're also working on your doctorate, correct?
Yes, I am. Yes, I am.
So tell me about that. Why has that become a goal of yours?
That's a very good question. Well, I'm always kind of like my dad was kind of like, no quiero que me digan que no puedo type of thing, you know? I don't want anybody to tell me that I can or I couldn't. You know, I'm gonna show you that I can. But it's not necessarily to show others. It's a personal goal. And of course, that accomplishing that can perhaps influence or inspire others to say, hey man, this guy, he grew up in the same time I did,
Hmm.
and he still lives in our town.
Yeah,
Like he never left, but he left.
yeah,
Like he never left, but he got to reach the he had the highest degree available, like
yeah,
the
yeah,
highest degree that you can get,
yeah,
you know. And so I admire a lot of people that reach that,
yeah,
uh, colleagues or people that are presenters or people that I talk to, uh, like some of our colleagues here at central office and principals, and like, hey, like man, make sure you put like doctor in there, man, when you
yeah,
you put your name,
yeah,
like like people need to know that, and I used to joke, like when you go to central office, is this like a clinic or what? There's a lot of doctors, like es una clínica, unos doctores, like, but that was just being silly, but no, that's something that and I'm happy to say that it's no longer in the incubation stage. I'm my papers is out there. It's getting some life. And so I think this is the biggest test for me,
yeah,
academically, where they let you go on your own and see what you can do, man.
yeah,
Like, and it's somebody said it's a test of attrition, it's and see if you're gonna last, and so luckily we've my daughter's down from college during the summer, and so we both go like little local coffee shop there in Elson and kind of work on our stuff, and by the way, she's a UT, she's a when I was in high school, I got accepted to UT, and
yeah.
and I heard this story, and I was top 10%, and I didn't even know, like what why am I in this line,
Yeah.
that was my, if somebody say, hey, you're a migrant worker and you're top 10%, like, oh really? Okay. NHS, yeah. And but I got accepted, but it was one of those things that I didn't know enough, or you needed like $150 to reserve your dorm,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
you needed this, and you needed this other stuff, and it kind of like, I was like, man, and people offer like, hey man, like we can help out with this, we can help out, but it's it was not something that I was able to do, you know what I mean, and so I think my daughter kind of like, you know what, I'm gonna do it for you, Dad, kind of like,
yeah.
uh, she's gonna get her BSN in May, and that more power to her, and I'm very very proud, and my son should be graduating soon, as well,
That's awesome.
here at GV, but no, yeah, I'm working on my doctorate, and it's about students, and it's about dealing with their social emotional learning skills, and how they changed during the pandemic,
Hmm.
and now after the pandemic, and so that's my research is on. Um,
So you you earn your doctorate, and what what would be next for you? Do you want to Is it remain as principal? Do you want to be a superintendent? Because it seems like, you've got this upward trajectory. What else does Raul Valdez want to accomplish?
Well, I do have my superintendent certification already, right? So that's a check mark. But I know there's opportunities. There'll be opportunities out there, and so it, what I like to do in every place that I'm at is be able to be here and create a system or systems that when you're not here, things kind of work. You know what I mean? You
Mhm.
already have things that like it could just people can work and know exactly what to do in it and being successful, and I have a kind of distinct approach than old school style. I'm about conversations and relationships and things like that. And so but that's something that you know that I like to do one day, be able to be a superintendent one day, lead a district. And of course, there's a lot to learn in every position. There's a lot to learn as a principal, and I'm learning a lot from others.
Mhm.
Learning others and how to approach things and problem solve and you know moving towards collaboration, not just you know compliance. It's a putting our heads together and solving problems. That's the best thing. And yeah.
Raul, thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for the lessons that you've shared. And but as customary with all of my guests, and I always ask as we transition out, what parting words, what last piece of advice would you like to give listeners out there?
One thing would be identify what it is that you want to do, your goal. Have high expectations for yourself because you owe it to yourself, and take small steps and perfect those steps that you need to do. Make it into habits every single day, whether it be two things or three things or four things. Focus on a couple of things that are going to make you um, reach your goal
Mhm.
and perfect that. Make that a second nature, and you're going to reach it. I think you're going to reach it. I'm still in the process of that every single day, but don't get overwhelmed. Don't try to, don't. I know multitasking is something that it's like, oh, I multitask, like no, you know what? Get good at one or two things
Yeah,
and do those and move forward, every single day.
great advice. I love the advice. I think that's perfect way to end the podcast. So, Raul, thank you for your time today. I'm sure your story is going to resonate with a lot of our listeners out there. Um, and I appreciate your time. This
Well, thank
concludes
you.
another this concludes another episode, the Way to College podcast. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, follow, and all of that good stuff. And we'll see you again next time. Bye bye.